Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Mumbles and Things challenge. That's not right. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Mumbles and Things YouTube channel. We are gonna continue this series that I started in the previous video. And by the way, my name is Maggie, if we haven't met before. It's also Maggie if we have met before. But we're continuing our series where I'm just answering questions that people have sent me about a year and a half ago, actually. At the beginning of 2020, I sent out a survey to I think it was in my Facebook group, but it might have been to the email list. Either way, I sent out a survey to just hear what people had questions about, to learn what people wanted to know more about, to give me ideas about what I should talk about, and I never did anything with that because 2020 was nuts. Right after that, I started writing my book, and everything went, all of my systems and everything were out of whack. So now I'm getting back into it. I found this document on my Google Drive and I was like, hey, I should probably answer these questions. So I'm just answering them and making videos, and hopefully you all enjoy them. So much incense. I have to move this. I look like I'm on fire. Okay. So I'll start where we left off in the previous video. The last question I asked that time was about simple versus complex spells. So if you're interested in that, go check out the previous video. And by the way, if this is something that you're interested in, if you want to hear me answer questions about witchcraft, then please hit that subscribe button and the little bell next to it to be notified whenever I post new videos. All right, so here we go. The next question, it seems like a lot of people have very similar questions. So someone asked, how did I discover that which path was right for, how she discovered which path was for her. And I did talk a lot about how I came to witchcraft and all of that in the previous video. But I think this one's also sort of, I'm going to answer it this way at least. I'm interpreting it my own way. They might also be wondering how I decided which type of witchcraft to practice. And I think that that's really an important thing to think about. I always talk about that in my Witchcraft 101 course, about choosing a path based on the things that you're interested in. So, if you are interested in growing things and gardening, then practicing green witchcraft and following that tradition of practice is a great option, because a lot of that is about growing things and being in the garden and being around plants. If you're really interested in astrology and the zodiac, then being more of like a celestial witch. And, if you love cooking, if you love spending time in the kitchen witchcraft is a good option to follow. And so that's kind of what I did, was I just decided, I consider myself an eclectic witch, but sometimes I'll call myself a kitchen witch. Sometimes I call myself a hedge witch. It really just depends on what I'm most interested in the moment. And what I did is basically I look at the things that I love doing, the skills that I have, the things that I'm interested in, and I incorporate magic into those things. And that's how you can decide which path is right for you, based on the things that you're interested in already and how you can incorporate magic into those things that you're already doing. And the next question, I'll move on. Okay, so this one's a good one. What is your favorite healing herb and why? I think chamomile. I love chamomile. I use it a lot. I drink chamomile tea every night almost. I have this one blend that's chamomile, lavender, and mint, and it's so good. I didn't make it myself. I bought it from a company called Plum Deluxe. I think that's who it is. It's called Cuddle Time tea or something like that. And it's so good. You might not think that those flavors go together. But recently my sister and I talked about chamomile on the podcast, and I just realized how much it can be used for, both medicinally and magically. And I didn't even recognize the way that I was actually turning to it until we started talking about that, because Erica shares the medicinal properties. Erica, my sister, she talks about the medicinal properties because she's been studying herbalism for I think 2 or 3 years now. and I share the magical properties. And it is just like such a well-rounded herb, and it's like so cute. It's like that little daisy flower with a big yellow middle and the sparse white petals. So it's like a really cute looking delicate flower. So that I love that about it. I think it tastes really good. And since it can be used for so many things, I just I kind of am practical when I choose my favorite thing is which one can I use for the most stuff. So yeah, I would go with chamomile, but who knows? Maybe that'll change someday. So I'll move on to the next question. So this question is, what is my experience with my witchcraft abilities? And then it goes on to ask about family, friends, and social expectations. So I think that what they're curious about is how it is like being open about witchcraft with the people in my life, because that is a common struggle, especially with people who maybe come from like a fundamentalist religious upbringing. Their family might not be super supportive of practicing witchcraft. I'm just noticing how much smoke is coming across the screen, and it is like very smoky, but maybe it adds to the mystical effect. So anyway, they're asking about how my experience with my family, friends, and social expectations. And this obviously comes up for people who have a hard time coming out of the broom cupboard to the people that they know in their life. I know one person who was like totally shunned from their workplace because they were reading about tarot while they were at work. It was like their lunch break, so don't get me started. And then I know people who have lost custody battles because their ex-spouse was not into the witchy scene and wanted their children to be raised Christian, and the judge sided with that spouse. So I know that there's definitely times where family, friends, and society in general is not very supportive of our way of viewing the world and our perspective and witchcraft in general. For me personally, I shared a little bit in the previous video, but I'll go into it again. I grew up in a house that was very open-minded, encouraged questioning everything, not just religiously or spiritually, but just like in general. If you have a question, ask it. And if, my parents didn't know, or if my grandparents didn't know, or my sister didn't know, we were going to look it up together and we were going to learn something. So that's kind of where I came from in my upbringing, is just like a really open, curious family. So I didn't really ever have trouble in that regard. And now my sister does the podcast with me. We just finished reading the book Spiral Dance by Starhawk, which is a fabulous book if you haven't read it before. We read the 20th anniversary edition, so there's notes in the back at the 10-year anniversary and the 20-year she added, which was amazing because she talks about how she has grown and how she's changed and how her beliefs have shifted over the years, which I think is a really valuable thing to do as a witch, is to always be learning and growing. Anyway, that's an aside. That's my family, is just like really into spirituality and nature-based religion. Like that's my dad he's really into the outdoors and experiencing nature. Like I think that's how he is most comfortable with exploring spirituality. Yeah, for me personally, it's been amazing. I've had a very supportive family. And with that said, it's like hard for me to give advice for how to approach family and friends who are not so open with the beliefs. I know with my friends who maybe wouldn't necessarily call themselves witches, I just kind of approach things like anything that I would do for myself in terms of like casting spells or carrying crystals or drinking tea or whatever. Anything that I would do for myself, if a friend approaches me with that issue, then I would just offer that as an advice, or like maybe I could put together a spell for you. You could carry this crystal, all of that stuff. And most of the time, my friends are really open to that, and it gets to the point where sometimes they approach me for that advice. So just being yourself, I think, when it comes to friendships, because with our family, you don't necessarily get to choose who your biological family is, and if they're not open to you, you're kind of stuck with them. But then if you have friends generally are people that you've chosen to, obviously, you choose your friends. And so when So when you're just yourself and you share yourself with them, most of the time people are going to be excited for you and be enthusiastic with you about the things that you care about. So if you share that part of yourself, they might not necessarily like believe in it or become witches themselves, but they will at least, be most friends should be at least excited or open to listening to you talk about the things that you believe in. And then when it comes to society, social expectations, that's a little tricky because that comes from shifting a cultural narrative surrounding what witchcraft is. And that's really challenging. That's one thing that I try to do with my blog and with the podcast and now with the YouTube channel, just showing that witches are normal people, that we're not like delusional or, thinking that it's not like pop culture magic. That's not what we think and that's not what we believe. The way that I see witchcraft, and I think this is pretty common among witches, is that it's just a way to explore yourself, explore who you are, do things to improve your life and your situation, and at least how you view your life and your situation. Changing the narrative of what people think of as witchcraft is a big part of how we'll change the way society thinks of us, if that makes sense. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to go on to the next question. Okay, so this person is asking, I want to know what a coven actually does. So it really varies from coven to coven. It really does. It varies. I mean, I can't even say most of anything because there's no most. A coven could be just 2 people. A coven could be, up to 30 people, maybe more. I don't know that the beauty of a coven is that it's usually a small group, which I would classify as like less than 30. And that when there's a group that's small, you get individual the way that who was it? I just read about this recently. I think it was in Spiral Dance by Starhawk talking about covens. She said the beauty of I'm gonna check. 1 second. Yeah, it was in this book, Spiral Dance by Starhawk. She basically said that the thing about a coven is that if someone was missing, the absence would be known. So if you get into a bigger group, if someone is missing for a meeting, the absence isn't felt, but with a smaller group, that absence is really felt. And that really stood out to me when I was reading that chapter because as someone who's kind of always like in big groups of friends, I always felt like people wouldn't really miss me if I wasn't here. And that was probably just like low self-esteem stuff and being a middle schooler. But I did always kind of have that feeling of like, I don't feel like people really know me or care if I'm here. And it wasn't until I was in high school when I started having like much closer friendships with a smaller group of people that I felt like if one of us wasn't here, it would be really like it always felt like a big deal. Like where's that person? And so I think that kind of translates, and that's what Starhawk was saying, is that with smaller groups, everyone feels important, and that is what a coven is really about. The reason that it's different from like a church congregation, because so for one thing, it's that small group, and then another thing is the leadership. And again, this isn't like standard across all covens because there are some covens that have like a specific leader or 2 leaders, and that doesn't change until that person decides they don't want to anymore. But of most of the covens that I've heard of or been to, there's like a leader and it changes. People are learning and growing in their practice and they want to share that with the group. And so different people might lead for that particular meeting or ritual or gathering or whatever you want to call it. So those are 2 things about a coven. And the question is, what does a coven actually do? And I can't really answer that because there's so much variation. But for the most part, a coven is a gathering of witches who put all of their energy into one purpose. I've talked about this in like some of my other trainings and podcasts about the purpose of the spell. That's the first thing that you want to do. You want to know exactly what you're trying to accomplish. So the coven might do a ritual for like maybe one of the members is going through a really challenging time and needs some encouragement. And so the coven might come together as a group, put all of their energy in, create this like amplified power through all of these different people in a circle, putting in their intention and giving that encouragement to that specific member. Or it could be, covens get together for political reasons, for environmental causes and women's rights and all sorts of different reasons. So just whatever that purpose is, the reason that someone might be in a coven and the things that a coven might do are to amplify the intention of one individual into the group's intention, and that will create a more powerful focus on that specific intention. But yeah, like I said, it varies from coven to coven, and that is not necessarily, that's not like across the board, this is what all covens do, but that's like my understanding of covens. And honestly, I consider myself a solitary witch. We do rituals together in Mumbles Academy at the new moon and the full moon, and then we offer blessings and things to each other, which I also consider like a group purpose. But as far as like meeting in person, I haven't done that in years. So this is coming to you from a solitary witch with her doing her best to share her understanding of the coven. So I think we're gonna just do one more question for this video, and then I'll see you in we'll continue in the next Q&A. The next question is, what advice can you give me to keep practicing? That's a great question. I think the first thing to do is, what is it that's holding you back? Because that really changes the type of advice someone might receive. So I talked about in one of my blog posts about skepticism. I believe that witches walk this line. It's like a knife's edge between the known and the unknown. And so the known is what we've discovered through the scientific method of questioning things, offering a hypothesis of what we think is the truth, going through a rigorous observation period to discover a conclusion. And that, when repeated over and over again, when many different scientists do similar tests, that can be turned into scientific theory, which is basically an established set of facts. And so there's the known of what we know to be true. And then we also explore the unknown, and we go into a world of what I would consider magic that isn't known. It's not established through scientific method, it's unknown. And so a lot of times when that happens, there's like skepticism that arises about, well, am I even doing anything? Am I just like kidding myself? Is magic even real? Sometimes we get into that place where our skepticism speaks up. And I think skepticism is really important because it helps us to keep one foot grounded in reality when we're exploring those unknown realms of spirit and all of that. And so I think it's really important to have that little voice being like, is this even real? If that's where this is coming from, if your question is coming from, how do I keep myself practicing when I'm feeling skeptical? I think listening to that skeptical voice is really important, and making sure that you're not like going too deep into a rabbit hole, going too far into a delusion, following a conspiracy theory, maybe finding your way into cult indoctrination and all of that stuff, because sometimes the skepticism is what's keeping us safe from those dangerous areas of the unknown. So if that's where that question is coming from, that's what I would say. It's listen to that skeptical voice and see if it's your intuition telling you, trying to keep you safe, and then see if you can find your way back to some more grounded, doing grounding exercises and ground yourself back into your physical reality before pursuing that exploration into the unknown again. And if it's coming from a place of not being interested in witchcraft anymore and not feeling like you're motivated because it's not really something that you want to do, then I would pursue that as well. If it's not a path you want to follow, then you don't have to, you know, you don't have to be a witch if it's not something you're interested in anymore, or or if your interests have changed or anything like that. It's okay to change your beliefs or to reflect on what you believe in and why things are changing for you. So if that's where it's coming from, then I would definitely explore why you're not interested in it, and if it is something that you want to recommit to, remotivate yourself with. And then if the reason that you're asking how to keep yourself practicing or how to keep you motivated with your practice is because you just like don't feel like you have time, or you're not really sure what to do at this point, then I would say to follow your interests. So you maybe take some time to like journal or to do some tarot readings or something to help you kind of figure out what it is you want out of your practice. What are your beliefs in terms of what the world is like and your worldview in general? And figure all of that out and then see where that leads you. I think a lot of times, you know, when people say I don't have time for something, it's because you haven't made time for it. I mean, sometimes we are really busy with things, but with anything, you have to prioritize your time. We only have so much time in the day, and we need to sleep and we need to eat and spend time with our loved ones, and obviously, you know, working and taking care of your body, and there's so many things to do. And that is why I always think about the things that I'm doing as magical, because then I don't feel like I'm losing something by, you know, not doing a ritual. Or if I run out of time one day, I've done a lot of stuff during that day that was magical because I see magic in every mundane activity that I do. I don't know where I was going with this thought, but I think, yeah, I guess what I was trying to say is that if you don't feel like you have time, see if there's a way that the things that you're doing are mundane. See where magic is part of that moment. Like making coffee. If you add sugar or cream to your coffee, you might stir it, and as you're stirring, think about how you want your day to go and infuse your coffee with that intention. To visualize the way that you want your day to go as you're stirring your coffee, and then when you drink that, you're fueling your body with that intention, and that's a magical act. You're creating your day based on that visualization. So that's just one example, but there's so many ways to do that. In fact, another example with the coffee, I do this with my tea, but you could do it with coffee as well. Before I go to sleep at night, I set out my teapot, I wash it of all the tea, you know, tea gets all that like tannic brown stuff on the inside of my teapot. So I wash it really carefully, cleanse it of the day, and then I set it out on the counter. It has a very specific spot that is sacred to the teapot. And then I put out like a crystal grid, and sometimes I'll choose crystals based on what I need for the next day. Sometimes I'll choose crystals based on what I want to remove from the day before. Just depends on what's going on in my life. And I set out this really intentionally so that when I wake up in the morning, my teapot is in the center of this grid, and all night it's been absorbing that energy. I know that any tea that I drink out of that teapot, that's going to be what's fueling me. I'm drinking it and it's going into my body, and so that intention is becoming part of me. So those are just like examples of ways that you can incorporate small acts into your day-to-day life that will be magical, will be witchy, without needing anything sort of elaborate, you know? So thank you for watching. If you got this far, I really appreciate your views, and make sure you like this video if you did in fact like it. I will continue this series if it seems like people are enjoying it. I'll probably continue it anyway, but let me know if you do have any other questions. Obviously these questions are coming from the beginning of last year, so they're older, but I'm sure there's people who still have these questions. But if you're watching this now and you're like, wait, I want my question answered, then I'll link to the same survey that I sent out and you can respond, and I will answer your questions in this series. So again, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video.